Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's presentation of Bill Barclay's lecture performance of Muse on Fire.
My name is Bill Barclay, and
He's an extraordinary man.
yeah, evidently. I am a composer and an actor who spent a lot of time with Shakespeare's plays over the last 10 years. While working on his plays as a performer or sound designer, whatever, right, I've become struck at how much music there is in his plays. Not just actual music in the form of songs and dances, but the sublime musicality of his poetry. His prolific use of music as metaphor, the huge role music plays in his Elizabethan world, and several passing references to the music of the Spheres. So about 5 years ago, I began to research what the music of the Spheres actually is, in tandem with my desire as a composer to understand whether music is, as it is so often said to be, a universal language. The modest origins of these questions have taken me farther than I could have possibly ever imagined and have led to, quite simply, some of the most thrilling discoveries of my life. I'm going to share part of my journey with you here tonight, taking us to a not-so-ancient worldview when the studies of mathematics, music, geometry, astrology, poetry were all facets of the same eternal puzzle instead of the increasingly specialized spheres of research and instruction that they are today. Our guide for this cosmic collision course of discovery shall be a writer of no less genius than William Shakespeare, the last great chronicler of this ancient worldview of order and harmony. The shoulders on which we stand will be some of the greatest minds of all time: Pythagoras, Plato, Johannes Kepler, and the brilliant modern theorists of superstring theory. In my excitement to share these with you tonight, I'm reminded of my own truest interests and my own stake in my curiosity and understanding. I am interested in art that inspires collective and self-discovery. I am interested in what divinity, if any, shapes our ends, rough hew them as we will. I'm interested in the bonds we all share, our own tender connectivity, and the fundamental human need for resonance. Thousands of years ago, and for thousands of years since, until about, Shakespeare's day, more or less, human beings all over the world in many different cultures believed somehow that the planets are singing. Their song is the song of creation, or the song of the gods, or of some divine order from which we all came and to which we will eventually go. Many cultures, like the Greeks, believed that we could hear this divine harmony in moments of highest inspiration or of enlightenment of self. They believed that this cosmic song informed and even governed business here on Earth, and that the music and order we create here is meant to emulate the music and order of the spheres and to remind us that it exists, to remind us of our true connection and our purpose in life, to them, in their words, to learn to remember the bonds that connect us all. Music today is absolutely everywhere. It's in our cars, it's in our homes, it's on our television screens, it's in our computers, it's in our phones, it's in our iPods, it's on our radios, it's in Starbucks, it's in the elevator, it's in the dentist's office, in the supermarkets, it's all over the place. You can't really go anywhere without hearing music of all kinds, blaring out at you from the sidewalk, from some guy's big subwoofs he's put in the trunk of his car, on Store Drive, whatever it is. Right? And how much of it do we actually listen to? Well, let's not be so hard on ourselves. We're not asked to listen to it all. So what have our ears done as a result? I think so. To a certain extent, anyways. But music isn't only everywhere in our common world, it's also everywhere in our language. An idea can resonate with you. Obama's rhetoric can have overtones of JFK. We can tune in or tune that out. We can develop a harmonious relationship that really strikes a chord. In this, we are not unique. The alacrity with which people from all different time periods have reached for music as a metaphor to explain complex experiences is hardly a new trend.
My native English now I must forego. And now my tongue's use is to me no more than an uncased viol, or a harp, or like a cunning instrument cased up, or being open, put into his hands that knows no touch to tune the harmony.
Oh, but they say the tongues of dying men enforce attention like deep harmony. Where words are scarce, they are seldom spent in vain, for they breathe truth that breathe their words in pain. Be that no more.
Let's do some facts about the music in Shakespeare, just so we all are in the same kind of understanding about this. Shakespeare, first of all, wrote how many plays?
39.
38.
36 and 37, I guess, depending on if you count one of the really bad ones. So let's say 36 plays. Within those 36 plays, there are over 50 songs, actual songs with lyrics in the plays. Some of them have none. Those are rare. Some of them have many more. Twelfth Night and The Tempest each have 7 songs each, making them more like musicals than just regular straight plays. There's a lot of military music, entrances of royalty, cannons, drums, trumpets, sackbuts, all accompanying people's various entrances and exits. Sackbuts. I suppose I could just throw out something like a sackbut. The sackbut is the first trombone. So the idea that you had a long hunting horn that then had a slide, that you could actually change the pitch. Regrettable name, though. So there's lots of other examples of music in his plays. There are full-on music lessons, such as Taming of the Shrew, with actually rather sophisticated music theory that Shakespeare must have known. And this is my favorite. There are over 100 additional songs mentioned in the plays. The lyrics of tunes that we can only presume that everyone knew, because why else would he put them in there without saying what song it was from? But is this often done today? I'm not really so sure. It's as if I were to write a modern play and I'd have one character say to the other, just picture yourself in a boat on a river. People from the 60s were laughing at that one. Lastly, of all the music in his plays, what are we to make of this repeated usage of the music of the spheres?
But would you undertake another suit? I had rather hear you to solicit that than music from the spheres.
If he, compact of jars, grows musical, we shall have shortly discord in the spheres.
My gentle Puck, come hither. Thou rememberest, since once I sat upon a promontory and heard a mermaid upon a dolphin's back, uttering such dulcet and harmonious breath that the rude sea grew civil at her song. And certain stars shot madly from their spheres to hear the sea maid's music. I remember.
Deep of night, when drowsiness hath locked up mortal sense, then listen I to the celestial sirens' harmony that sit upon the 9 enfolded spheres, and sing of those that hold the vital shears, and turn the adamantine spindle round, on which the fate of gods and men is wound.
It feels like, reading it, seeing it, that we should all know what this is. Do I? Do you? How many of you, before receiving an invitation to come to this performance this evening, Ever heard of the music of the spheres? Raise your hands. All right, so many of you. I want to now turn to what the source of the myth is about spherical harmony, in order to understand and appreciate what the myth is, so that we may ultimately have a better grasp on all of what you said and what is true.
All audible musical sound is given us for the sake of harmony, which has motions akin to the orbits in our soul, and which, as anyone who makes intelligent use of the arts knows, is not to be used as is commonly thought to give irrational pleasure, but as a heaven-sent ally in reducing to order and harmony any disharmony in the revolutions within us.
That's from Plato, in his masterwork, Timaeus. Revolutions within us. True? Poetic? Both? We have to start with Plato. He not only started it all, or so we think, but his and Aristotle's writings fueled the rebirth of humanism of the Renaissance. Plato is credited for starting this lineage of the music of the spheres, and he believed that somehow, intuitively, there is a song coming from the planets. He believed that music was the purest art form. It represented order in our world and all around us. The spheres above must also have order. Therefore, they must also have music. But lacking the science to prove this, Plato resorted to myth and created the myth of which he expounds at the end of the Republic.
Taken up into the heaven, sees the universe turning on a spindle fixed in the lap of necessity. And on each of the spheres stands a siren, which is carried round with it and utters a note of constant pitch, and the 8 notes together make up a single scale.
Aristotle felt this was logistically impossible. But both Plato and Aristotle did agree that music does, in fact, represent the divine order of the universe. It literally unites our spirits with the eternal and is the song of creation of everything. The music of the spheres gained even more traction, becoming an unseen holy constant like the philosopher's stone or the elixir of life. Hack scientists and religious zealots, numerologists, Neoplatonic philosophers, and astronomers and astrologers all poured themselves into a deep study of music's inherent power, believing it could unlock the very secrets of existence. This belief was so powerful that the Christian church essentially appropriated this divine belief in something unseen and turned this belief in planetary music, which is ultimately a pagan belief, into something involving a huge and elaborate hierarchy of singing angels, cherubims, seraphims, Gabriel with that horn, the trumpets in Jericho. There are so many examples of music in the Bible, it is astonishing. And one of the reasons why this is so is because the Bible was coming directly out of this zeitgeist, believing inherently in this invisible power of the planets singing. But these many connections to music do not stop at the Bible. In fact, they do not seem to stop anywhere.
All religious traditions that acknowledge the existence of angels concur in giving them musical attributes. One can see such angels in the courts of heaven, as pictured in Iranian manuscripts. They appear in Hindu temple sculptures as the seductive Gandharvas, of whom the Mahabharata has much to tell. In some Tankas of Buddhism, they surround the central figure, and in certain meditations of Tantra, one is instructed to imagine one's guru attended by beautiful dakinis, singing, dancing, and playing. One scarcely need mention the musician angels to be found in the sculpture, wood carving, and stained glass of innumerable European churches, or in the paintings of manuscripts and altar pieces. Finally, the Kabbalistic tradition of Judaism tells of a song which the angels sing whenever Israel sings her song of human praise, the two resounding together.
Thank you. This is from a phenomenal scholar, the world's foremost scholar on the music and harmony of the spheres, Dr. Jocelyn Godwin, professor at Colgate University. It seems that music all over the world became intricately woven into the fabric of spiritual thought. This is not a coincidence. All known cultures in the world have created myth and beliefs, and therefore have highly nuanced religious traditions. All known cultures in the world also have music. Music moves us, it inspires us, and seems to allow us to sometimes experience very large emotions. What religious experiences can you imagine or have heard of that lack music? Spherical harmony was incredibly useful as a religious analog to belief for the church because converts were used to believing such music even though they couldn't hear it.
Memory? Do you hear the music of the spheres?
Not now, my lord. But I remember some 4,000 years ago when the sky was first made, we heard it very perfectly.
By the same token, the first tune the planets played was Salinger's Round, in memory whereof ever since it hath been called the beginning of the world.
Well, how comes that we hear it not now?
Our ears are so well acquainted with the sound that we never mark it.
Thank you. This is from a play by a little-known playwright named Thomas Tomkis. It's a play called Lingua, written in 1607, the same year as Antony and Cleopatra. The belief that our ears are so well acquainted with the sound that we never mark it or can't hear it anymore was first professed by Plato. Our own human ears respond and adapt automatically to non-threatening, repetitive sounds, to sort them out from all the more potentially threatening ones. Our conscious does this too. We suppress awareness of useless stimuli that different parts of our brain deem not of necessary to survival, or not necessary to doing the task that you are now doing, or not necessary to avoid doing bodily harm to yourself. Have any of you ever had a pet gerbil? Or another such small, fuzzy, adorable little rodent in a box? Or in a cage? Or in your first grade or second grade class, that's where I encountered my first gerbil. You can, this story's not that interesting. You can tap on the cage and it will go away. And then you come back, you can tap on the cage and it will go away. Then you can tap on the cage and it won't move anymore. Tap, 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 it's not going to move. It registers that you're not actually going to eat it. And so it actually kind of stops listening to the tapping. We do this too. How many of you have ever grew up in a kitchen or a living room where there was a pendular clock? Anybody? Now this happens all over the place. I think there are a lot of things we hear over and over again that we don't actually register. How about spare change, please? How about, how are you? How am I? Well, I could really go into something there. If we are unaware that this is happening, its reality can escape us. Now, the interesting thing about the eye and the ear is that they're not the same, of course, and they don't record the same amount of information. The eye and the ear go back a long time with a lot of symbolism in many different cultures, some of which is used to mentioning right now, is useful for me to bring up. The eye is the masculine sense. It goes out and receives information as quickly as it can. The ear is the feminine sense. It receives and goes straight to the brain. Now, the eye, of course, goes straight to the brain too, but our listening, our cochlea, are very intimately woven into our brain and all the way around it. And our ears are consequently, much more sensitive than the eye. In any given second, your ears can take in over 10 times the amount of information that your eyes can. Okay, I'd like to do an example. In honor of the fact that we today are at the zenith of the eye in reigning over the ear, I would like to do something that I think is kind of fun. Okay, so take your thumb and put it out in front of your face, just like this. Okay, now, all right, now put your thumb down. Okay, now just look left to right. Notice what your eyes do. That's right, you don't need your head for this. Do you think that you're actually scanning as you look from left to right smoothly? No. Now put your thumb in front of your face. And now, as you move your thumb left and right, follow your thumb with your eyes, but just notice what it looks like behind your thumb. With your eyes focused on your thumb, you start to see your visual field behind it smooth. Now put your thumb down, now look left to right. Do you notice a difference? The way the eyes actually work is they take snapshots. Your eyes move quickly. They don't move smoothly. Your ears move smoothly. I hope you found that as cool as I did.
Hours of Spencer.
Hours. No idea. Just picture yourself in a boat on a river. Shakespeare's time was obviously one of dominance over the ear, coming at the end of what I like to call, the period of oral culture before the birth of the printing press, and we all became such intelligent, literate people. People in Shakespeare's days went to hear a play. They didn't go to see a play. Almost all of London over the course of a year could be found in the playhouse. Most went several times because Shakespeare's company was producing plays at an alarmingly fast rate. And there were very modest technical considerations that would be feasts for the eye. There were no sets. There was no lighting design. It was all done in broad daylight. If Shakespeare needed to have the audience understand that it was chilly outside, a character would say, "'Tis bitter cold." If he meant you to know that it was in the middle of the night, then he would start a play with, "Who's there?" "I can't see you." It's all in the text with Shakespeare. That's why it's so much fun for actors. But the point I'm trying to make is that all the information about the setting and the world was translated from the text through the ear, in what I like to call the old model. And music in the Elizabethan period, like today, was everywhere. It was in taverns, brothels, churches, fairgrounds, parks, around dinner tables. People, after they ate dinner, used to pass out sheet music in different parts and used to sight-sing through songs together. When was the last time you did that? Ballads were posted on hearth places. Like today, we put cartoons on refrigerators. Without television, without a radio, without much technology, you had song and singing. And they knew and felt intuitively, like their parents told them, that God sings too, and that the music represents the order of the universe.
Look, how the floor of heaven is thick inlaid with patterns of bright gold. There's not the smallest orb which thou beholds, but in his motion like an angel sings, still choiring to the young-eyed cherubims. Such harmony is in immortal souls, but while this muddy vesture of decay doth grossly close it in, we cannot hear it. Come! Ho! And wake Diana with the hymn! With sweetest touches pierce your mistress' ear, and draw her home with music.
I am never merry when I hear sweet music.
The reason is your spirits are attentive. For do but note a wild and wanton herd, or race of youthful and unhandled colts, fetching mad bounds, bellowing and neighing loud, which is the heart condition of their blood. If they would hear, perchance, a trumpet sound, or any air of music touch their ears, you shall perceive them make a mutual stand. Their savage eyes turn to a modest gaze with the sweet power of music. Therefore the poet did feign that Orpheus drew trees, stones, floods, since not so stockish hard and full of rage, but music, for a time, doth change his nature. The man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. The affections of his spirit dark as night, and his affections dark as Erebus. Let no such man be trusted. Mark the music.
This high sense and belief in order goes further, and to understand the scope of its inclusion with all things seen and unseen, we go to the organizing structure of belief in the Elizabethan period, which is called the Great Chain of Being, of which spherical music is a part.
The chain stretched from the foot of God's throne to the meanest of inanimate objects. Every speck of creation was a link in the chain, and every link except those at the two extremities was simultaneously bigger and smaller than another. There could be no gap.
Thank you, E.M.W. Tilliard. The great chain of being is the best example of how extraordinarily ornate this belief in divine harmony became. It started with the Greeks in the earliest days of antiquity, then was given in a slingshot into the future by Plato and the myth of and this final flourishing in the great chain during the Renaissance. It just so happens that the great chain of being makes love with music on a whole other, very special level. To understand how and why, we have to take a little trip back in time, even to another ancient world for a moment, the land of high school physics. Okay, we're going to do a little simple physics here to really understand this. The human hearing range is between roughly 20 and 20,000 hertz. So you say, well, what's a hertz? A hertz is actually 1 oscillation per second. So if I clap once a second, you are hearing 1 hertz, okay? 2 hertz, right? And so on. Now if I could clap 20 times per second, you would start to register these claps, not as a rhythm, but as pitch. Now I tried to figure out what I could do on my body to do 20 of anything per second. And the only thing I can come up with is this. I'm going to do that again. Do you hear how it becomes pitch? Okay, it's just my lips flapping. But, and it's just a...
I think it's for that whole lecture.
This is really why I have these guys out. Any oscillation that you repeat over 20 times per second is going to start to sound to the human ear as pitch. Now, it's not the universe that describes what is pitch and what is rhythm. It's our own instrument. The universe does not distinguish between rhythm and pitch. Pitch that we hear is just rhythm really, really fast. So if I were to sing A at 440 hertz, what that is my vocal folds vibrating 440 times per second, right? And an octave below that is half the length. So this is 440, and this is 220, and this is 110, and on, lower and lower until we get to 20, and then it drops out and we start hearing it as rhythm instead of pitch. Well, let me give you a little context for this. So this is our major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 3, 5 is a major chord on the piano. C, E, G, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Okay, everyone with me? So when we talk about scale degrees in music, the 1 and 5 is a particularly famous one. 1, 5, 1, 5, 1. 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1. Tough crowd. Okay, I'd like to do an oral demonstration. So, hey, stand up. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to sing to you the harmonic series. Every pitch that you hear has a myriad of other pitches on top of it. These are the overtones, but they're in a very distinct relationship to each other that is very symbolic musically. So let's say the pitch that you hear, okay, let's say you hear this pitch. What you're actually hearing is many pitches above it at the same time. You can train your ear to listen to these pitches, but when there are many more people singing them at once in a resonant chamber, they can start to pop, okay? This is a fundamental frequency. Let's call it the fundamental. Keep going, guys. Nice to have friends in here. Now, the first pitch that you hear is exactly twice the frequency of this pitch. This is the first overtone. What pitch do you think it's going to be? It's going to be the octave. You hear this pitch and this pitch automatically, okay? But I'm having Daniel sing it, not only because he's a nice guy, and he has a nice mustache, but because it's also the most it's the loudest overtone. But it's harder to hear because it's the same pitch as this one. But I wanted him to sing it out so that you can really hear it. Okay, now, 3 times this pitch is the second overtone. The second overtone is the first new pitch. This is the fifth. 1, 5, 1. the first original pitch in this series. That's the second overtone. Again, you're hearing this while you're hearing this pitch. Okay, now the next overtone, does anyone want to sing it? Anyone know what it is? Octave, there we go. Okay, again, reinforcing Daniel's pitch and Graham and Gabriel's pitch. Now, here comes the fun part. Anyone know what the next overtone is? What does this sound like to you? Yes, this is the major triad. This is the center of Western tonality. 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, over several octaves. This pitch being twice this pitch being 3 times of this pitch being 4 times this pitch, and this pitch being 5. Let's do the next one. It's the 5th again. Okay? Now we get to the really strange part, because there's one harmonic left that doesn't fit into the major scale. It's a double flat 7th, but it's still intoxicating, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, the harmonic series. Let's look at it like the actual wave that it is. The string is basically going up and down based on the oscillations created in the bow. It's making the string go up and down and up and down and up and down like a wave. One wave from here to here. If it were a sine wave to continue, right? You with me? You can think of the string as a literal wave, because that's what it's doing. It's behaving like a literal wave. One wavelength. Okay? Now if Alex puts his finger halfway through the string, we get the first overtone, otherwise known as the first harmonic. Because the vibrations in the string are creating a standing wave, and all multiples of the fundamental sound at the same time. That's why the harmonic series exists. So all multiples of this string length, half the string length, a third of the string length, a quarter of the string length, will all sound the other harmonic. So that's half the string length, then we'll play a third of the string length. Think about how many beautiful melodies you know that use just these harmonics. 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 1, 2. Exactly. All of those notes in that beautiful, timeless melody come from the harmonic series. In anybody's singing voice, just like these guys up here, when you sing, you can hear the harmonics sometimes in your vocal range. And there's a certain style of singing called throat singing that allows you to pop certain harmonics out of the mix, as it were, allowing you to hear even melodies based on just using the harmonics. I'm going to do an example of this for you. I'd like to turn the lights off, and what I'm going to do is sing 2 verses of Amazing Grace. Did you hear the pitches? Yeah.
It took a while.
Yeah, it does. It sometimes takes a while. You have to listen to the whistling. It sounds like a slight whistling over the pitch. What it actually is using cavities in your mouth to pop certain harmonics one at a time and allow them to appear more out or higher than the other pitches. And it's really fun to do in the car during traffic. For the Elizabethans, order in the cosmos meant harmony, meaning both harmony and music and what harmony and music represents. The musical belief in celestial harmony was literal and metaphorical at the exact same time. Well, think of how attractive this beauty is to the ancient Renaissance mind. The simplest numeric ratios and the most beautiful tones inextricably linked in an obvious and glorious manifestation of divine order like God's code. And its celebration in music is a story of consonance and dissonance. Dissonance, which stands for us, consonance, which stands for it. You know, the story of all music, or most Western music, that starts with a tonality that begins with this major chord can be looked on as the prodigal son. Starting with home, leaving and exploring dissonances and exploring lots of other different harmonies that exist outside of the harmonic series, and then coming back to the harmonic series as if coming home. All music that starts with that major chord and ends with a major chord can be described as different journeys away from home and back to home. Home meaning, of course, the home of the gods and the home of the planets. Now that we've visited the harmonic series, we know it and we're comfortable with its place in the Elizabethan world, we're going to take a very exciting departure from the world of the poetic and the metaphorical to realities of the order of the cosmos that have truly staggering repercussions. Shakespeare lived in a really remarkable time. There was a huge flourishing in the Renaissance, as we've talked about, the birth of the printing press, the straddling of the oral to the visual culture, but he wasn't the only great mind to live in this time, as we know. In 1571, in a little town in Germany, was born a man named Johannes Kepler, who was a very extraordinary man. He was an amateur musician, he was an astrologer, and he wanted to be an astronomer his entire life and prove the existence of the music of the spheres as a literal entity, not just the myth that he had inherited from everybody else. When I found this, some of these studies by Kepler and what their implications were, that really tipped the entire process of this lecture forward. And so I really want to hone in on exactly the exciting science of this here because it really is staggering. Kepler spent a long time inheriting huge sheets of data from his predecessor at the University of Wien in Germany by the name of Tycho Brahe. Brahe was studying the orbits of the planets and was about to, some say, come to the conclusion that the planets, by the way, not only were people being burned at the stake for thinking that the planets at this stage went around the sun instead of the Earth, okay, which any even hack astronomer would have known and just kept silent for fear of being persecuted. But many think Brahe was about to come out with what is credited to Kepler, which is that the orbits of the planets are not circular, but elliptical. Kepler realized that this was true and kept this information to himself for a little while. Why? Because the circle is the divine shape. Circle infers that God created the universe. What the hell is an ellipse? Right? It's kind of oblong and ovalesque and kind of ugly, and each ellipse is different from all the other ones. And an ellipse has two foci instead of one focus. Right? Not good for the church. So, Kepler, now this was a guy who had had a lot of really, really close calls in his life. He spent a good 5 years writing letters almost every day on behalf of his mother, who was coming in and out of jail, almost being tried and executed as a witch. Kepler also was very keen on what had happened to Galileo, and was very reluctant, shall we say, to come out with the fact that, hey guys, ellipses are cool. So what he set up to do was to try and find why the ellipse was a more divine shape than the circle. Okay? And Kepler worked for a long time crunching numbers and came up with the harmonic law, which I would like to explain to you because it is so cool. In an ellipse, you have the sun at one focus and the planet goes all the way around it. Okay? At this point, it's at its fastest speed. It's called the perihelion, the moment when it gets the farthest this way. Peri meaning around, as in around helion, the sun. Remember heliocentric? That's a term for the sun-centered view of the cosmos. We inherited from Ptolemy before Copernicus changed it to the earth-centered. backwards. So this, making an elliptical orbit around the planets here, we get to the perihelion here. This is the fastest because we're slingshotting around the sun. And going back here, we're getting slower and slower. And this is the aphelion. Meaning from, away, phelion again, away from the sun. Aphelion, perihelion, aphelion, perihelion. Fastest motion of the planet, slowest motion of the planet. So Kepler basically inherited Brahe's data about the speeds at the perihelion and aphelion moment in the orbit and started dividing them by each other, believing that somehow planets in moving on this regular train of faster and slower would have some sort of influence over the other planets. Well, this is what he found. Now, we could only see up until Jupiter at this time, so we don't have Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto to deal with. Besides, Pluto's not even a planet anymore. But what he did was he took the speed of the aphelion and the speed of the perihelion of each planet, and he divided it by itself. Then he took the fastest and the slowest speeds of each planet and divided them by the fastest and the slowest speeds of the planets next to them. Okay? So, for example, he takes the slowest speed of Mars, divides it by the fastest speed of Earth. Takes the fastest speed of Earth, divides it by the fastest speed of Mars. Takes the slowest speed of Saturn, divides it by the fastest speed of Jupiter. Takes the slowest speed of Jupiter, divides it by the fastest speed of Jupiter, and the slowest speed of Saturn, and the fastest speed of Saturn. With me? So he creates 74 measurements that are in the form of ratios, right? Ratios, just like harmonics are in the form of ratios. Again, the first harmonic is a 1 to 2, the second harmonic is a 1 to 3, third harmonic is a 1 to 4, and reduces them, simplifies the fractions. 58 of these 74 measurements conform to the first 3 harmonics in the harmonic series. They reduce to 1 to 2, 1 to 3, and 1 to 4. Not 11 over 37, not 216.687 over 8,337,000, but 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. This was the happiest day in Kepler's life. He thought he had solved the entire mystery around the elliptical orbits of the planets. He thought he had cracked the code in understanding God's hand in the creation of the universe. And in some sense, he was right. But why isn't this the stuff they teach you in high school? Is my question. It's too beautiful. I've talked to a NASA astronomer. I've talked to astronomers at the University of Indiana, at the University of Iowa. I spoke to one astronomer at MIT. And the party line is this. It's a coincidence. Or my other favorite one, it's an accident. But what do you mean it's an accident? Well, it's just a freak of nature. It just happens to be that, the planets are moving in harmonic proportions. But really, there are others that don't. So what? I can't find in anybody's writing anywhere a reasonable explanation of why the music of the spheres actually exists. So I made one up. I'd like to look at another area of science to help explain this, which is called entrainment. Now, has anyone ever heard the word entrainment? Oh, right, yes. Okay. Basically, entrainment was discovered in the early 1600s by a Dutch scientist named Christian Huygens, who took 2 pendular clocks and put them on his kitchen counter and set them to ticks slightly different. So he set them here to tick, to tick, to tick, to tick, to tick, and then he left and went on vacation. And he came back several months later, quite the benefits package, and he discovered that they were actually tick, 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 tick. So he did it again. Same thing happened. It turns out that when you have 2 regular vibrations existing into infinity with each other, so powered by quartz or whatever was powering the clocks at that time, they will eventually influence each other and come into a harmonious relationship. In this example, it's 1 to 1. Other examples have done this with clocks and have found that maybe it's not tick, tick, but tick, 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 tick. Another stable relationship, 1 to 2. This is an amazing discovery that has all sorts of implications, entrainment does. It really tends to explain a lot of things that maybe defy a lot of explanation. We are all made of vibration. We know this. We know from modern science that actually all of our molecules and bodies are all ultimately made up of vibration, in the case of superstring theory, in little vibrating strings. And if this vibration is regular and exists for a long enough period of time, it will eventually find a consonant relationship with all other vibrations. Now this to me is amazing. It's almost like vibrations have minds, and they are going through the universe, seeking other things or being affected by other things that have regular vibrations, and over time, if given enough time, will eventually ride steady until deterred by something else. I find this incredibly profound, and it helps to explain all sorts of other phenomena. Anyone know a married couple who's been married long enough to start to look like each other? I think that's entrainment. I want to take a couple examples of finding the harmonic series in other fun places before we draw it all in here, because I want you to really get the sense, as I have, that the harmonic series exists in so many other places that we haven't seen before. So we're going to take a look at the very, very large, the very small, and then the very, very, very small. Let's start with the very large. Now, astronomers may think that it's an accident that this all happened with the planets singing in harmony with each other, but they can agree that orbital resonance is an actuality. Now, what is orbital resonance? Orbital resonance is when orbiting bodies find some stable relationship with each other in a basic harmonic relationship and stick it. So the first three are, I think it's Europa, Ganymede, and Io. I think those are the first three. Those three moons of Jupiter, the first one, let's say, has a one-to-one relationship with itself. So we call that 1. Okay, Europa does. Ganymede rotates around Jupiter every two rotations of Europa. Io is every 4 rotations of Europa. So the orbiting patterns of the moons around Jupiter are in the relationship of 1 to 2 to 4. Exactly. They are in a completely stable relationship and will be throughout eternity unless something comes along and whacks them, and there was an asteroid or whatever. This is what astronomers call orbital resonance. And yet, I can't seem to get any answer out of them about why it is that they actually found this resonance. Well, it seems kind of obvious to me. You have the Big Bang, the solar system goes kerfuffle all over the place, mass starts to congregate, gases congregate into huge gaseous planets, and everything starts to orbit around the largest orbiting body, in which case we have our own solar system. We all orbit around the sun. We all go around the sun. All the planets are going around the sun for hundreds of millennia. And over time, the regular influences of these orbits will start to affect each other, wouldn't they? Because according to entrainment, any regular vibration affects any other regular vibration. So it seems that people say, well, it's only 58 of 74. I say, yeah, but we're living in 2010. What if we took a time machine back 1 million years, and then we took that same time machine forward 1 million years, and we made the same measurements? Wouldn't you expect that it would actually become more consonant over time? We do not live in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect universe. I don't have to say anything more about that to any of you in order for you to agree with me in all the many ways that you do. The universe is not perfect at all, but it has enough perfect pieces to remind us that we have come so far. And that entrainment, that basic property by which vibration seeks consonance with all other vibration, will cause the planets to eventually come into more and more harmony over time, and will cause us to come into more harmony over time with each other. That is the truest meaning of entrainment, and to me, the truest meaning of the harmony of the spheres. It's not where we are, it's where we're headed. Now let's look at the very, very, very small. In the last 20 years, the most exciting branch of physics is called superstring theory. Ever heard of it? It's one of the reasons they built that huge particle collider in Geneva, to prove, or to get closer to proving, the fact that string theory exists. And the reason they can't prove that it does exist is because we can't measure, we don't have electron microscopes that can get deep enough to actually see what it is they think is going on. But this is what they think is going on. Inside the photons, inside every particle, all the quarks, the smallest particle we can possibly get to is actually a tiny filament that's vibrating. There isn't actually any matter at all. It's actually this little, what they call a string, vibrating. Now, the relationships of the vibrations of strings are very interesting. This is from Brian Greene's The Fabric of the Cosmos.
Calculations show that the masses of the string vibrations follow a series analogous to musical harmonies. They are all multiples of a fundamental mass, the Planck mass, much as overtones are all multiples of a fundamental frequency or tone. By the standards of particle physics, the Planck mass is colossal. It is some 10 billion times the mass of a proton, roughly the mass of a dust mite or a bacterium. Thus, the possible masses of string vibrations are 0 times the Planck mass, 1 times the Planck mass, 2 times the Planck mass, 3 times the Planck mass, and so on, showing that the masses of all but the 0 mass string vibrations are gargantuan.
Thank you. 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, just like the harmonic series. If this is true, and we're all made up of strings, and our strings are vibrating in integer relationships to each other like the harmonic series, what does that say about us? Now, Pythagoras, so many years ago, there's a famous story of him taking his students to a rock, pointing at the rock and saying, "Look, singing music." Now, people at that time might have thought he was crazy, but now we know he's right. It is singing music. We know that rock, we know its frequencies, we know its particle-carbon makeup, and we know what frequencies it sings at. So from the large to the very small, we have an abundant examples of how the harmonic series is starting to weave its way in all over the place. Now let's look for some examples in stuff we can see. There is a law called Zipf's law, which I find really interesting. Zipf's law is a law of probability distribution. You take a whole group and you distribute it in various ways, and the relationships actually tend to line up in very intriguing ways. Let's take the words of English. The first most common word in English is the. The second most common word in English is of. The third most common word in English, I want to wager a guess? A. Exactly. The, of, a. The first most common word of English, right? Of, the second most common word of English occurs approximately a half the amount of times as the first one. The third word, occurs approximately a third of the amount of times as the first one. That's Zipf's law. Let's look at another example. U.S. cities. Most populous U.S. city is? New York City. Second most populous city is? L.A. Third most populous? Chicago. Okay? New York has about 8 million citizens. L.A. has about 4 million citizens. 1 to 2 relationship. Chicago has about 2.8 million citizens. About a third of New York City's 8 million. This is very strange. Now let's look at another example. It is shown that people who print scholarly articles tend to cite a lot of the same scholars. The first most cited scholar is cited twice the amount of time as the second most cited scholar, and about third as often as the third most cited scholar. And furthermore, Zipf's law tends to dominate also when you look at how many library books each of these scholars took out. I'm not kidding. Now, it doesn't dominate every single group of behavior all over the world. There are some countries I looked up where, yeah, sure, there's really only one major city in England, and it's London, and Birmingham doesn't really come close. But unless you've ever been there. Zipf's law relates to all sorts of harmonic formula all around us. And there's really no decent explanation why. It just is. It just exists. I finally got a hold of Dr. Jocelyn Godwin and wrote him my conundrum and said, you know, Dr. Godwin, I'm just wondering, I've read all of your books, and I'm wondering what you personally think about why the universe and the music of the spheres has such amazing harmonic proportions. Because I can't seem to find anyone to take a stand on this anywhere and make a case for why this is actually the case, except for a silly theory I have in my mind about entrainment that I don't feel like saying to you because I'm going to sound like an idiot. But would you care to tell me what you think this all means? And this is what he wrote.
Dear Mr. Barclay, I'm glad my work has been useful to you. As to the explanation, I'm content to accept that this is part of the intelligent design of the cosmos in the Platonic sense. I also suspect that when one seeks a certain type of cosmic order, or absence of such, the cosmos obliges by supplying it. Or to put it another way, we perceive only that type of order that our consciousness and beliefs permit, whereas the reality is infinitely more complex than we can ever know. Try telling that to the astronomers, though.
Sadly, I haven't yet had the opportunity to lay on Professor Godwin my thoughts of entrainment, orbital resonance, and string theory. And yet his point is particularly relevant to Kepler, who crunched data for over a decade before coming up with the harmonic law. He also gives honor, which I like, to the mystery of the puzzle. But had Kepler been alive for Christian Huygens' discovery of entrainment, I believe he would have been caught by it as I have. In part because it makes sound sense, but in part because it's a beautiful story. Am I seeing a beautiful story because I want to see a beautiful story? I, obviously, am not the person to weigh in on this. But if we are all vibration, and if vibration influences all other vibrations within its range, and if all regular vibrational forms will eventually form stable harmonic relationships with each other, and this phenomena exists in any number of behaviors from electrons to planets to cities in the United States, if I can't buy into what that says about the big picture, at the very least, it can help me understand why I like the music that I like. Inanimate matter is vibration. Vibration seeks consonance with other vibration. It will all be okay. But this not in itself is music, but music, its harmonic journeys to and from the home, that is the harmonic series and the major chord, is what this universal inclination towards order sounds like. Matthew 11:15. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear.
Which is invisible. Therefore, the poet, the artist, brings us closer to nature and can convey more and profounder and better things about it. Someone who has once been plunged in the cosmos of Platonic philosophy lives from this truth. That was the case with Kepler.
And Shakespeare. Could music be constantly reminding us of what is beyond this world, beyond this muddy vesture of decay? Does music exist to tell us indeed that there is a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them as we will? If so, does all music do this? Do Beethoven and Hannah Montana do this equally? If not, why? And does this question infer that we have to, in some cases, bring our open selves to music that we wish to use as such a tool for remembrance? We've learned already that the preponderance of the harmonic series doesn't mean that the universe imitates music by chance, but that music is the expression of the simplest and most beautiful harmonic relationships that the universe seeks throughout its life. What is most intriguing to me is that we've known this for thousands of years, and yet only now is the scientific method coming around to tell us obvious things, like we are all one in vibration. Watching too much TV does actually make you depressed. We are now sure that when Pythagoras said of the rock, "Look, singing music," we know that he was right. We know the rock sings and we know its frequencies. Its particle carbon makeup and orbiting electrons adhere to much the same order as the planet it spins on, an oversized electron spinning around its nucleus, the sun, perhaps. Walter Pater says that music is the highest, most pure form of art. Beethoven says, music is the one incorporeal entrance into the higher world of knowledge, which comprehends mankind, but which mankind cannot comprehend. And to some degree now we understand more what is meant by music being a universal language, yet even this thought doesn't tell me much more about why I prefer a certain James Taylor or Bruce Springsteen song to another one. Well, 2 years ago, Bernard Holland wrote this in the New York Times.
Going back to Pythagoras now is tough. Not because the science is wrong, but because music isn't the same. It's not heavenly perfection anymore. It's about human frailty, another way of reporting what a mess we're in. The Greeks thought that music would make us look up, not straight ahead, or else at our shoes.
Tragically true. Our obsession with dissonance and conflicts has roots in the fatal characters of the House of Atreus. Dissonance, chaos, disorder, and anarchy must be called human impulses because they seem to occur everywhere. It feels intuitive enough, though, from our look at harmony on the story of leaving home and coming back, that we, like music, define ourselves by the paths we carve through dissonance on our ways in and out of harmony. That in order to appreciate concord, we need discord. Pain gives pleasure context and appreciation. The journey from one to the other is hopefully one of growth, of reaching higher and higher spin states. But what in our lives provides the role the ancient Greeks found in Deus Ex Machina, the God that descends on a disordered world at the end of the play to restore order, stability, balance, and prosperity? Mozart? One thing on this front seems clear. As we divorce ourselves culturally from the invisible forces that tie us together, choosing analogs of communication over interpersonal ones, or closing off from the outside world, we hear fewer and fewer of the vibrations, harmonies, and rhythms of everyday life and of each other. I believe today that in spite of our hyper-interconnectivity, thanks to technology, we are both further from this than ever before, but at the same time starting to make a surprising comeback. For when we look at modernism, the nail in the coffin of consonance dealt to us by Schoenberg and Stravinsky, the isolating worlds of Samuel Beckett, the cubic abstraction of Picasso, all their dutiful apostles stretching the extremes of their art forms ever further away from the center, all perfectly timed to accompany Auschwitz and the atomic bomb to shatter any remaining hope that at the end of the day, God is still there. We see once again art repositioning its mirror up to ever more diffracted nature, and some of us may wonder, what comes next? More isolation? More suffering? More celebration of frailty, of imperfection? Perhaps. Who could have predicted that science, that perpetual dasher of religion with its increasingly infuriating hyper-specialization and existence as a polar opposite to creative arts, might lead the comeback, drawing our attention to the religious beliefs that are echoed across the world through known human history and that now actually appear to be objective truths. In our current world of particle accelerators and ever more microscopic lenses, we know the universe to be made up entirely of vibration, and not just random vibration, but ever more organized, harmonized sound each second reflected in microcosm and macrocosm. Well, this seems as close as we've ever gotten to the theory of everything. Superstring theory, valuing this presence more than ever before, is thus far one of the best bets within the scientific community to bring all the forces of the universe into one equation: the strong, the weak, the electromagnetic and gravitational forces. At this moment, thousands of physicists are working on this problem. The basis of their calculation is the notion that we are all vibrations, and not just random ones, but ones that are ordered along the mathematical principles that govern the harmonic series, the same ones that dictate the scales for musics around the globe. Yes, harmony is a metaphor for the divine, but it also is the divine.
We have all been parts of Adam. We have heard those melodies in paradise, although the water and earth of our bodies have caused a doubt to fall upon us. Something of those melodies comes back to our memory.
Though the vibrations of stars and pulsars of our nervous system, planetary orbits and their related velocities, spins of electrons, molecular structures of elements that make up plants and animals that reflect harmonic order from leaf structure to the proportions of our very bodies, though they sound so constantly and quietly that we cannot hear them by our modern conception of listening, they are there. And in our highest moments of self, our deepest connection to the universe's energy that cannot be created or destroyed, in our dreams and in our revelations that resensitize us to every subtle influence and force around us, we have the capacity to hear, as if for the first time, the song of the planets, the song of our origins, and the song of God.
It is a riddle how so many learned heads should so far forget their metaphysics and destroy the ladder and scale of creatures as to question the existence of spirits.
How true. So, what does the music of the spheres sound like? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like the last word to come from William Shakespeare. The final thing we'll do for you this evening. This is the final scene from Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Pericles has been comatose for many years. He's in some sort of a coma state. We don't even know what it is. But he can't talk, he can't hear, and many presume him to be dead. I think I'll let the acting do the rest.
I am Pericles of Tyre. Rise, thou art my child. Give me fresh garments. Mine own Helicanus, she is not dead at Tarsus, as she should have been. She is thy very princess. Who is this?
The governor of Mytilene, who, hearing of your melancholy state, did come to see you.
I embrace you. Give me robes. I'm wild in my beholding. Oh, heavens bless my girl! But hark, what music? Tell Helicanus, my Marina. Tell him, for he seems to doubt how sure you are my daughter. But music.
My lord, I hear none.
None? The music of the spheres. List, my Marina.
It is not good to cross it. Give him way.
Rarest sounds. Do ye not hear?
My lord, I hear.
Most heavenly music. It nips me unto listening, and thick slumber hangs upon mine eyes. Let me rest.
A pillow for his head. Well, my companion friends, if this but answer to my just belief, oh well remember